It was Buster Olney who earlier today said, hey, Hall of Fame, change what you're doing. Bring Kruk and Kuip in as a tandem rather than getting into this as individuals. And now joining us on the River Islands guest line, and by the way, on YouTube as well, is the great JP Morosi. We love it when JP comes on. And speaking of Cooperstown, he's got the Road to Cooperstown podcast. How are you, JP? What's going on?
I'm doing great, my friends. And by the way, I do love that idea from Buster. We don't typically see this happen, of course, with the Ford C. Frick Award and multiple people being inducted for that award at the same time. But they should grant an exception here, especially, let's think about this. Now, when you think about it here, do you want all the Giants? Do you want it all next year, or do you want to spread it out a little bit? And by that, I mean you could have Dusty, Bochy, Buster Posey, and then both broadcasters all in 1 year. On some level, you might say, yeah, let's do it all at once, but you also might want to come back to Cooperstown time and time again. So I'll leave that up to those in a much higher pay grade than me, but I certainly, you could make a case that you'd have 5 Giants going in at the same time.
That sounds fun. That sounds really fun. But then again, so do multiple trips to New York. Speaking of the Road to Cooperstown, what can you tell us about what's coming up there?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So we've got season 3 is rolling right now, which I'm really excited about. We've already had our debut episode, which was actually Jeff Bagwell. And the next one, which is coming out on Tuesday, is Dennis Eckersley, who everyone's going to be thrilled to know X still tells you everything that's on his mind. This man is an open book, and I love that about him. The conversation, we talked for an hour, and no restrictions, just whatever you want to ask me. It talks about his life off the field, of course, and his journey through baseball and the ups and downs, even as being one of the greatest closers of all time. And we've got a little clip prepared here. This is Eck talking about the disappointment of '88 and the Gibson home run to then being there for the final out right at first base at Candlestick 1 year later.
That was huge. You know, I was a San Francisco Giants fan as a kid, you know, Willie Mays, Juan Marisol, all that. And to be in Candlestick Park and get the last out, you know, especially when we had taken 10 days off, we almost didn't start the World Series again, and we did, and we won it. That was a huge moment for me. And I don't know. I mean, I played with a lot of great teams, a lot of good players, a lot of great players, and one championship. So you got to be fortunate to get it, and I got it in Candlestick Park.
Yeah, incredible.
So you can
memories.
hear the emotion from Eck there, talking about how emotional it was for him to be there in his home ballpark, right? He grew up there watching Mays and Marichal, then he goes there as a World Series champion. But he has talked before about the weight, obviously, of that World Series, understanding the tragedy with the earthquake and how that affected everyone, of course, during that time. But it's good perspective from Eck that he was so great for so long. And as he says, one championship. Of course, you're blessed to get the one, but certainly he has great perspective on how much he learned from the disappointments from Gibson in '88, from Alomar in '92. He's so amazing talking to Eck, the perspective he has on life now. He is still this eternal teenager with his optimism and just the light about him. So I loved having the conversation with Eck.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the full thing. And, you know, you brought me back to the dynasty that should have been, that wasn't. '88, the Gibson wrong-legged homer, and then the Nasty Boys in 1990. But I want to take you back to the Giants, not only '89, but the Mike Krukow era, 1986, when he wins 20 games, and he goes on to be the most popular broadcaster, or one of them, in the tandem here in San Francisco history. What do you make of the Mike Krukow, not only the broadcasting era, but just his baseball career that spans almost half a century?
He is the epitome of what makes baseball special. And certainly every time I've had a chance to be around the Giants broadcast crew over the years, covering games, whenever I'd see them, you can tell how much they all truly love each other. And that to me is something I don't take for granted in this business. When you're seeing, especially the big four, we can call them, 2 on radio, 2 on TV, yep. And just how much they support each other. Obviously, the health challenges that Mike has had in recent years, and how Dwayne has just taken such amazing care of him along the way. And also then the younger guys, obviously the guys that are about more my age, who played during the dynasty years there in the 2010s, who have done such a great job of carrying on that legacy. So it I think speaks to why the Giants are such a special organization, and also how much the fans feel connected, and how Kruk and Kuip, their voices are so much a part of the way that an entire generation, plus more than a generation, of Giants baseball has been experienced. I think for players, for fans of a certain age, those two voices, obviously Vin Scully is one of one in the baseball world and in broadcasting. But as you know better than me, for Giants fans, they are as much a part of your heart and your experience as any other broadcaster anywhere for their teams. I mean, he is iconic, and the best part is that is Kruk and Kuip together, and not just together on the mic, but together the way they care for each other. And obviously John and Dave and all the great work that all four of them have done over the years. So I can just speak as someone who's lucky to get a chance to experience different franchises and different broadcast methods, that I can, I drop into different cities and know people around the country. The Giants are special. The Giants are special because the people in the booth leading the way are special. And you can just tell what a family person Mike is, and how thoughtfully he arrived at this decision. A legend, deserved Hall of Famer. I hope he goes in together with Dwayne. It'd be an awesome honor, well-deserved. And what I can say is just there has not been a person who has represented the game better on and off the field with what he cares about charitably, he and his family off the field. He's just one of the best people that any of us have ever had the pleasure of meeting in baseball.
MLB Network and much more. JP Morosi with us here on Willard and Dibbs 95.7 The Game. I mean, I think you have our minds bouncing a little bit with this Hall of Fame thing. I don't really know to what level the Hall of Fame induction committee and all of these things, how open they are to evolving. I mean, do you think this is actually possible one day that the two of them would be inducted as a tandem?
It would be rare. It would, and I would tend to say without precedent. I'd have to go back and actually. I'll just say I love the idea. Okay, so I love the idea and the thought of it, because while there are partnerships that have existed in different places, there is, to my knowledge, at this high of a level for this number of years, at this sort of coexisting level of greatness, I can't really think of anyone that I'd put in the same category, right? I mean, Again, Scully was by himself, so there's not really this tandem and this duo. Traditionally, the way it works is the candidates are voted on individually, right? Lon Simmons, of course, in there for that reason. So they're voted on individually as the committee then votes on it. Historians consider it. You would have to, I'm sure, petition the Hall to grant an exception to consider them as a joint ballot, which, again, to my knowledge, has never happened before. The Hall of Fame in general is many things that are wonderful. Flexible and adjustable on a moment's notice is usually not one of them. Which, by the way, usually serves the institution very well. So I would be surprised if this were to happen. I would say, however, that if you're a Giants fan, to make your reservations for July of next year in Cooperstown, because of Dusty, Bochy, Buster, some combination thereof, maybe all three, all have very good chances to be there. So I would say that based on my experiences with such matters, it's probably unlikely, but I still love the idea and would support it wholeheartedly.
Did a little quick research, John, and Mel Allen and Red Barber, the first ever inductees in the Ford C. Frick. They were partners. They went in 1978 together.
All right.
So
we've got
precedent.
We've got precedent.
All right.
So here we go, Giants fans. So this is not your assignment right now if you're driving, because I don't want you to do two things at once. But when you get home, I'll give you this advice, because I give it the same advice to my kids all the time. I'm old school. Write the letter. So get the letter writing campaign going, Giants fans. Send it all to Cooperstown. The address, you can look it up nice and easy. It's on Main Street there in Cooperstown. Send it in. Get the word out there. Letter writing campaign. It's old school democracy. Get it going.
I love it. Get your pens and your postage stamps and make it happen. The only bummer, John, is that this year is a pre-wild card era only for the Ford C. Frick, which leads me to think.
Okay.
And my question for you is the Hall of Fame a little? Are they doing too much in terms of excluding, people in certain years? And I'm not just looking at Barry Bonds, who now has to wait for the next cycle of Veterans Community, but even now the Ford C. Frick, we can't do the modern guys now. Is the Hall of Fame doing too much to restrict as opposed to expand?
It's a great question, and I spent a lot of time working with the Hall of Fame during the course of the year, of course. I think in general, this is a good idea to separate eras, and there's actually an argument I would like to see them differentiate and kind of move, because eventually you're going to have to move that yardstick perpetually forward, right? As you think about right now, the dividing line is 1980 for players, but I think you're going to have to move it even further into the future where Lou Whitaker, who I always advocate for, that Lou should be more grouped in with guys from like the early 90s as opposed to like Bobby Grich and Bill Freehan and Mickey Lolich and guys from the earlier eras, I should say. So I think that in general, the way the Hall of Fame does it is healthy, because you have to be able to study particular eras at particular intervals. Otherwise, you say, okay, era committee, who is all not in the Hall of Fame and is deserving, make up a ballot, go. Then you're going to say, well, so many people from so many years. And I think the general idea is that Carlos Delgado should not be on the same ballot as Bill White, or you name, before Gil Hodges went in. Gil Hodges and Carlos Delgado, very different experiences, different people, different eras. Yeah. I think you just for the sake of, I hate to say it, it's almost like a clerical organization idea. It's just say, okay, we're going to handle this bucket now of candidates, and we'll wait a year and handle the next bucket later. I think you should maintain a fluidity of where that line is, and the Hall of Fame does think about that with the board, about where they're moving those goalposts, and they should. But I generally speaking am very supportive of the idea of differentiating, because if you don't, you're going to be overwhelmed by the number of candidates, and deserving people will get lost unless you really dedicate the time to really honing in on those particular broadcasters or managers or umpires or players.
JP Morosi, MLB Network, Road to Cooperstown podcast. Okay, this is fun, JP. Like Giants broadcast team, fun. Giants near-term future at the Hall of Fame, fun. Giants, not so fun. So let's talk about that for a second. What do you think about what they just did this week, and how far away are they from something that is a little bit more substantive?
So here's the tough part for the Giants, and this is not exactly breaking news to any of you. Y'all live on the West Coast, and you're in the same division as the Dodgers. Yep. And those things are not going to change, okay? And wherever we're at from a labor relations standpoint, et cetera, whenever we come out of whatever we're going to go into as a labor situation, the Dodgers will still be really good. Okay, like that's not going to change. There's no amount of change that can happen that will disrupt how good they are. And so the Giants, I will say this, I like what they did at the deadline. They embraced where they were at. They made, I thought, some good moves. I'm glad they kept Logan Webb. He's a really important guy for them, of course. Being a local guy, what the franchise means to him, that was important. I like as well with the pipeline coming up, their top 4 prospects are all middle infielders, and that's a good place to start. In addition to Basabe, who's already up at the big leagues and making a nice little impact already. So when I see athletes up the middle, I get excited. When I see, by the way, Caden Kent, son of a Hall of Famer, getting traded over, that's fun too. And so when you bring in those types of players, I thought the Marquez addition, Ramon Marquez, I think he really is a promising guy that's kind of popped on the radar in the last year or so. That was a really good pickup by the Giants. I like that move. So they're not close to being as good as the Dodgers right now. I'd be lying if I told you that they were. But the foundation is there. It's getting better. I think that Eldridge playing well is important. Lee playing well is important. Devers is a bit of a mystery for me. Don't know what's going to happen there. Adames, you need more from him. It's amazing that, I was on the radio earlier today in Toronto. I was on the radio yesterday in Seattle. And I'm going to tell you the same thing I told those different markets in different ways. Guess what, Seattle? If Cal Raleigh doesn't hit, you're probably not going to win. Guess what, Toronto? If Vladdy doesn't hit, you're probably not going to win. In San Francisco, if Devers doesn't hit, and if Adames doesn't hit, and if Chapman's injured, you're probably not going to win. And at some point in time in the game, we can talk about marginal decisions and bullpen moves, and is the first-year manager good enough? If Devers is playing like an MVP, everything is different. And I think that, to me, is the big question. How do they get him back? Because that contract is massive. You probably can't move it now. He's your guy. Find a way, whatever that is. Now, it's been multiple managers that have tried to figure this thing out with Devers. No one's really gotten him unlocked yet. He's had a decent year, actually a better year than Raleigh has had in Seattle, for that matter. But they need more, okay? They need more from him and Adames, and they need Chapman to be healthy if they want to be competitive. There's a path to being in the wild card conversation next year, but it starts with health, and it starts with some of these younger guys coming up, I believe, and making an impact. And again, Basabe, I'm excited by what we've seen so far.
And figuring out the pitching, too, which obviously is something they're going to have to overhaul in the offseason. But
that, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that. In a ballpark like this, pitching and defense.
Manager, pitching, defense.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the manager, and I wonder what your view is from 30,000 feet and the national view of Tony Vitello as he wraps up a year that's been a disaster, not all on him, but what do you make of how he's gone through 115 games?
It's been interesting, right? I mean, hey, listen. At the end of the day, okay, here we go. On talk radio. Here's what's the quote? May you live in interesting times. Hey, no talk radio host ever has said, this team is too interesting right now. No, there's a lot to talk about with the Giants. Okay, so here's the thing. I know Tony. I like Tony. I think that in the right circumstance, he can be a good major league manager. I think this year, for a variety of reasons, it almost like started out bad, and then it just kind of never really got on track. I believe that he deserves another chance at this thing to get it organized. I realize that if next year starts out poorly, it becomes a little harder to justify. Buster Posey, a lot of big-time decision makers made a really strong point of saying, this is our guy. And that you move on from someone in Bob Melvin, who's obviously one of the more highly regarded people as a manager that this game has seen in a long time. You've got to now, I think, give this a little bit more time. This does not feel like a one and done. Sometimes you see that in the NFL. It's really rare in Major League Baseball. It's got to be catastrophically bad for it to happen. But now Bobby Valentine was. The next year the Red Sox went out and won the World Series with John Farrell as the manager. I don't see that happening here. But I also think that he needs to have a little bit more support around him about how the major league game is communicated. Obviously, there's been communication things that have gone on at different points of the year. It's different. It's different than college baseball. And again, I believe in Tony as a baseball guy. I really appreciate his personality, his enthusiasm for the game. I want to see him get one more chance at this thing, but I think it's also important for the Giants to look at this critically and say, wait a minute, how could we have supported him better? How could the people and the circumstances, the infrastructure around him gotten better? Communication is so vital. And the way the organization runs, it is an exhaustive job. And I just think that there were some ways in which maybe some cues were missed early, didn't get off on the right foot. I'm a believer that a second chance is warranted, and maybe with some different supports and organization, the result could be better.
JP, you're the best. Before you run, give us an over-under on how many baseball games they play next year.
Ooh, man. I'm an optimist, guys. I mean, so my number, I don't want to put a number on it, but I'm going to be, I'm going to be higher than most, because I just believe the game is in such a good spot, and eventually the decision makers on both sides of this have to realize that. What that all nets out, obviously the Dodgers getting Skubal does, I think, improve the owner's argument to say, hey, listen, we got to change the system here. Yeah. So I do think it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time, but I'm going to be an optimist that we'll find a way to play, if not a full season, something close to it.
Okay. Optimism is a wonderful thing. Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate you.